Creativity. Who could say to me in this room right now that you're not a creative person? Is there anyone who could put up their hand and say that they're not creative? And how good is that? Because so often our definition of creativity is about art and poetry and sculpture and ballet. But in fact, I believe that creativity is thinking about new ideas and thinking about doing things differently and solving problems. And I talk an enormous amount about creativity. And so I wanted to do a little exercise for you. This is the dancing lady. Many of you have seen her. There's no right or wrong answer here. But who at the moment is seeing her turning clockwise? Yep, because you're in such a right-brain creative headspace. And who is seeing her turning anti-clockwise? Yeah. And who's seeing her both ways? So apparently if you're seeing her clockwise, you're more right-brained at the moment. If you're seeing her anti-clockwise, you're more left-brained at the moment. If you're seeing her both ways, your brain's pretty balanced at the moment. And just to remind you of the virtues of our left and right brains. Now, we spend most of our time in the left side of our brain, and it's not doing us any good. It's about facts and logic and analysis, and we all have to have those attributes, but those attributes are being taken over by machines. And it's the right side of our brain and using the potential of the right side of our brain that connects us to all that there is, that causes an incredible keynote like the one that we just saw was all about connection. And so creativity has recently been named as the most endangered species of the 21st century. We live in a broadband culture, but we don't have the content to fill it. And yet a recent CEO global study by IBM showed that in an increasingly complex and uncertain environment, creativity is the most important leadership attribute. Does that surprise you? No. So we have to foster this incredible strategic tool in a world that is increasingly boxed in. So we created this values chart about creativity because I work with a lot of companies and they say to me, oh, but Tania, you know, creativity, it's one of those soft and fluffy things. We don't do creativity here. It's, you know, it's just not important and we're not going to invest in that. And I said, well, if you don't invest in that, you're not going to get to your bottom line outcomes. So everyone's searching for productivity, but we cannot get to productivity unless we unleash those values around inspiration and courage and passion and those outcomes of well-being and leadership. Now, why does this matter? It matters to me that I guess there's three really important things that I want to leave you with today about creativity and unleashing your creativity. And the first of those is about failure. And we've heard quite a lot about failure today. And embracing failure is one of those things that we all have to feel good about. We have to feel good about being vulnerable, as was just stated. And so when I was 14, I desperately wanted to have singing lessons. And my mum said, look, you're really busy, and just wait for a while. And my best girlfriend was having singing lessons, and I went round to her house and I said, look, could you teach me the song you've been learning? And so she could play the piano, and we sang the song together about 3 times. And at the end of the 3rd time, she said to me, Tania, you sing on your own now, I'll play. She played, I sang, and at the end of the song, she said, you're not good enough. You shouldn't bother having singing lessons. And I believed her. Who's been told in the room that they can't sing? Hands right up. Who's been told they can't sing? Always, about 85% of the audience. Have you been told by either your parents, your kids, a teacher, or your partner? Yeah? Yeah, right. But you know, I have news for you. We were given a voice, and we were given a voice so we were not to sit in silence. And all of us can sing. We're designed to tune in with other people. Anyway, as the years went on, in year 11, I auditioned for the school musical, Oklahoma. oh, Oklahoma, yeah. And I auditioned for the chorus. And to my incredible amazement, I got the lead role. And my friend, she didn't get in the chorus. And anyway, as I walked out on that stage on that first night, I was so sick to my stomach, I thought, I can't do this. And there was that little voice going, you're not good enough, you're not good enough. But anyway, I went out on stage and I thought, this is what I want to do with my life. And so the years went by and I started to do more and more singing. And finally, I started learning when I was about 22 years old with a very famous Australian soprano. And when I went to her studio the first time, she said, I feel, it's such a great thing that we've met and you have such a beautiful voice, one of the most beautiful voices, and I'm so happy to be teaching you. And I thought, this is great, I finally made it. I've got this career that I want to have. And she even said, and I'm going to send you to London to study with my teacher in London. I thought, this is awesome. This is the career I've always wanted to have. I'm going to get to do it. I went to London and I came back from London and I was in her studio room having a singing lesson with my pianist who was playing for me. And out of the blue, she says to me, Tania, I really think you should just focus on your law degree. You're never going to make it past the chorus of the opera. And I just thought, wow. And it took me all my courage not to break down in tears right there. I went outside in the street with my pianist and I said, I've just had enough of this. This is such a hard career. I'm just going to go and grow bananas in Byron Bay. And anyway, he said to me, look, hold it together, it's okay. And the next morning I woke up and I thought, no, there is no way I'm going to let her stop my dream. And so she made things really tough for me. She went to the head of Opera Australia and she said, I've told Tania de Jong that she's never going to make it past the chorus. And so whenever I went for auditions for Opera Australia, there'd be this little voice going, you're not good enough, and I knew that had been said. And so the years went by and I thought, well, I'm going to create my own ventures. And so I created all these amazing performing groups and other things. And it was an incredible career. And occasionally I would perform with the opera and I'd see her in the distance. And the way you studiously avoid people who have hurt you in that way, and we, do that. And about 4 years ago, I was coordinating this conference, Creative Innovation Conference that I produce, and I was at the Melbourne Recital Centre with my composer in residence, and there was a group of 6 people sitting in the cafe. And he said, come and say hello, and went up to them, and oh my God, and there she was. And it was the first time we'd actually looked at each other in all those years that had gone by. And I said, I haven't seen you for a long time, and I felt like saying, you bloody Anyway, yes, exactly. And so what happened was, we went to me and the pianist had to go to a meeting. We go to the meeting, and I said to the pianist, God, I wish I had told her what a bloody bitch she was. And he said, no. He said, Tania, turn it around. Why don't you say thank you? Look at the career you've had. It's so incredible. Would you have had that career if she hadn't have said that to you? And so we had the meeting, we came back to the recital centre, and I said, if they're still sitting there having lunch, I'm going to go up to her and I'm going to say thank you. And they were still sitting there. It's not you, it's okay. And he goes, right, I'm out of here. And I go up to her and I go, look, I just want to say, years and years ago, you said something to me and it changed my life and has helped me to achieve everything I've achieved. I want to say thank you. And she's not looking at me. Her face is going purple. The guy from across the table from her goes, what did you say? She said, I'll tell you later. And I said, well, thank you again. And I walked away, and the backpack that I've been carrying of all that self-doubt dropped off. And all of a sudden I felt free. I felt free to be all I could be. And really my life has expanded in exact proportion to that ever since. And some of us are able to keep going in even the hardest circumstances. And there's so many reasons for that, as we've heard today. And I guess the reason why I was able to keep going is because I was lucky to be there anyhow. Because in that photo, there's my granddad and there's my grandmother. And they came as Polish emigres to study with the leading sculptor in Vienna called Anton Hanak in late 1920s. And if you can imagine Vienna in the late 1920s, the richness of the art, the culture, the buildings, and they fell in love as young students, as you do. And one rainy Sunday, they're going along the road with the big, tall umbrella. And my grandmother says to my grandfather, "Oh, Carl, you know, what if somebody could invent an umbrella that fitted in a handbag? Wouldn't that be amazing?" And he said, "Oh, yes." And she said, "Well, let's keep this our secret." She went round all the lampshade shops in Vienna and she collected the old spokes, you know, those old lampshades. And she thought about her idea and she tried her idea over and over again. And you can see her there thinking, how in the heck am I going to get that huge that huge umbrella in that tiny little handbag there? And we've got our working notes and it says, "I tried and I failed. I tried and I failed again. But this time I'm going to try this." Until finally, in 1929, my grandmother invented the very first foldable umbrella. There it is, called the Flirt, which I think is a really good name for a little umbrella. And it was patented and manufactured in Austria in a factory for 10 years. And it's still manufactured there. But in 1939, the Nazis came into Vienna, and my family is Jewish. And I can't tell you all these stories now of the real extent of how they survived. But I will tell you that my grandfather was very innovative. And so he bribed a border guard and said, "I'll sculpt your bust in exchange for 3 passages out to Switzerland," for his wife, the inventor, and my mum, who was a month old at the time. And they got to Switzerland. The rest of the family was not so lucky. His 3 brothers and all their families perished. They got to Switzerland, and the German authorities contacted them. They said, "Mrs. Dordick, we believe you have the patent for the first foldable umbrella." And she said, "Yes. And we would like to buy it from you." And she had no choice but to sell her umbrella because she was uprooted and she had a 1-month-old baby. And so she sold the patent for the umbrella and she never saw another cent from incredible creative innovation. But her work lives on. The prototypes, the working notes are at the Dordick studio, the former home of my grandparents, which is in East Malvern, which you're all invited to visit. And it leads to some important questions that we can all ask as leaders. What could exist or be existing that's not existing right now? We can all ask that question. What if? Imagine if. And then how do we unlock our own voice and find our unique human potential? And that's what the rest of this session's about. And it's very difficult in this climate to unlock our own voice and our full potential. In fact, it's said, there was a 15-country study done that showed that 3 to 5-year-olds exhibit 98% creative behaviour, and that reduces right down to 2% by the time we get to 25 years old. But it's all sitting there. Imagine if we could unlock another 5 percentage points. However, we live in a world where we talk more to boxes and screens than to one another. And I have a theory of boxes. You know, we get born and we get put in a little box-like bassinet in a box-like looking hospital, and we go home to a house. If we draw it, we draw a box, yeah? Then we go to the supermarket and we buy lots of little boxes and cans, and we go to school, and unfortunately we often get taught to think in a box. And then we go to work and we have a box in our pocket, our mobile phone, and we have a screen in front of us, another box, and we get taught to tick the box. Or we have to tick the box. And then when we go out of this life, we go out in a box, right? And I believe that life happens on the bridges between the boxes. And what happens on those bridges? We connect with one another as real human beings. We connect with nature and everything that is. And we find our true creative potential. And all of those things happen between the boxes. But we really have to find those moments. And it becomes fundamentally important to nurture the attributes of humans that set us apart from machines. In this technological world, we have to nurture the attributes of love, compassion, caring, courage, determination, and so on. We have to unlock all of our human potential, not just our intellectual intelligence, but our social, cultural, emotional and spiritual intelligence. So a lot of people say to me, what are your top innovation tips, or what are the tips of great innovators and great teams? And I think all of us in this room, well, we're all creative because no one put up their hand. I mean, this morning I was speaking to a corporate group and at least half the group put up their hand saying they were not creative. And yet they were all top leaders. So curiosity, what if? Failure. Number 8. Number 8, fail. We've heard a lot about failure today and embracing failure. And I think there's 2 great definitions of failure that I'd like to share with you. One of them is fantastic achievement in life equals fail. Yeah? And first attempt in learning. How about if we embrace that? And let's all fail. You know, I spoke at a conference last year called FailCon, and you couldn't speak at the conference unless you were prepared to talk about failure. And when I'm recruiting people, if a person can't tell me how they've failed, I don't recruit them. So failure is a really important part of being a great creative innovator. And probably the most important attribute for creativity is diversity. And that is my final point today, is about diversity. And we are going to show you a live case study of diversity in action. But I believe in the power of what I like to call positive human collisions. That is colliding with people we would never meet with in the normal course of life and deliberately going and seeking to build bridges of understanding with people who we wouldn't normally collide with. So 5 years ago, I set up my second charity called Creativity Australia, and we have a program called With One Voice. And each week, we meet together in locations, including in Sydney and in Melbourne, and soon to be in Queensland, and we bring together executives and fortunate people like all of us in this room with job seekers, with homeless people, with migrants, with people with depression and disabilities, and everyone comes together. It's not a choir of hard knocks. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's a choir that represents a tribe, a global village. And every week we meet in these With One Voice programs. We share supper, we share songs, and we share a wish list. And you'll hear more about the wish list in a moment. And the wish list, though, to give you a very short example, is anyone in this choir can put a wish in the little bag each week, and it might be, I want help with my resume. I want to find a job. I want someone to walk home with. I'm looking for a partner. We've had 2 marriages. I would like free guitar lessons. I'd like help with my mother's will. And because of the diversity of the group, we are able to fulfill an incredible amount of these wishes. But if we were all just setting up a normal choir, we would mainly be probably white Anglo-Saxon people over a certain age, and we'd probably feel very comfortable with one another because we probably wear similar clothes and we think similarly and we endorse one another. And this choir could make you feel a bit uncomfortable, but once you get used to it, you suddenly realise, my God, we're all the same. We are all the same. And why does it work? When you bring together diversity with singing, magic happens. And why is that? So singing is not just something that I love to do, but there's a lot of neuroscience that is showing the incredible benefits of singing, especially singing together, on our neurotransmitters, on our right temporal lobe of our brain, for waking up the right side of our brain, for giving us hormones such as oxytocin and improving our immune system and helping people with strokes and depression and others to heal and find a new way of connecting their neural pathways. And when we sing together, we breathe together, we crescendo together, and we decrescendo together. And what is really amazing is there's studies that shows that when we sing together, our hearts start to beat together. And there you can see the joy. So just before I introduce this incredible choir, I want to tell you about 2 people whose lives have been changed. That lady there is called Nathalie. She came to us from Cameroon. Her sister had been massacred in front of her eyes. She'd been looking for a job in Australia for 4 years, and the experience of discrimination that she had was awful. She came to choir, and after 2 weeks, she was crying, and we said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I've got a job interview." And we said, "That's fantastic, Nathalie, what's wrong?" And she said, "I don't think I can get the job." And we said, "Where's the job?" ANZ Bank. We said, "That's great. How can we help you?" So we gave her mock interviews, and most of all, we gave her love and support. And 2 weeks later, she came back and she was beaming, and she got the job. It was in the call centre. But she was still wrapped just to have a job, to have a sense of meaning and purpose in her new land, Australia. Anyway, the weeks went on, and after about 10 weeks, the choirs can perform, and they started performing at all these big events and conferences. And they'd tell their short stories and sing songs, because the choirs never just sing. It's all about sharing stories, sharing challenges and hopes and joy and inspiration. And so what happened was she would share her story, and the choir would get an absolute standing ovation every time that they performed, and people would be crying. A few weeks later, she emailed me after a few of these performances. She said, "I can't come to choir anymore." And I said, "Why not?" She said, "My hours have gone from 9 to 5 to 9 to 7:30. I said, "That's terrible. Who's going to feed your kids?" And she said, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, can you speak to your supervisor and explain?" And she said, "He never talks to any of the migrants." I said, "God, it's got to be something we can do." And fate intervened, and I was asked to give a keynote speech at a very senior business dinner. And the theme of the conference happened to be diversity. And so I said to the organiser, "Look, I've got this diversity choir called Melbourne Sings. Do you think that they could perform?" And they said, "Yeah, what a great idea." And they made a donation, and the choir performed 3 songs, 3 stories, and after each song, the audience stood and cheered, and they were all crying. Anyway, so what happened was, after the 3rd song, this lady comes running up to the stage with tears in her eyes, and she grabs the mic and she says, "I just want to say how humbling it is to see this model of social inclusion. We talk so much about diversity, but are we really listening to the diverse voices?" What was that? Are we really listening to the diverse voices amongst us? And anyway, so what happened was, it's my timer. Is that my timer? Sorry, it's all right. We're still on time, Beth, don't worry. And anyway, she got up and she said, "I'm Managing Director of ANZ Private Bank." And I said to her, "No pressure or anything, but would you help Nathalie get a job and change her hours?" And so she did, and she came back to choir. So there's always a place. So, ladies and gentlemen, there's a place. There's a place within each of us. And after this piece, we're going to welcome a very special choir. There's a place of potential. There's a place of love. There's a place to care, and there's a place to share. There's a place to forgive. And we often look for this place outside of ourselves. But in actual fact, it's within each of us. There is a place for us. There's a place for us somewhere Thank you. Thank you. So please, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the microphones now for the choir.